to continue with some history again today, but I'm going to start with the churches and the schools first in Springdale. Yesterday I mentioned that the Methodist faith was the first religion in Springdale, now known as the United Church. But actually the first school in Springdale was erected by the pioneers in around the years of in the 1890s, maybe 1894, 1896. There was a small one-room cabin school with 10 pupils attending, and the first teacher was Miss Barbara Small. However, this small school was burnt in the fire of 1904. So in 1905, a new school was erected. Before the fire, actually, the school was also used as a church. So after the fire, as well, a new church was erected, so they were then separate buildings. The second school was a little larger than the first and later made into 2 rooms, and this was located behind what is now the United Church down the center of town. As population grew, another school was built in 1917, and the old school was used for a courthouse. In 1917, a new Methodist 2-story school was what we had. There were 2 rooms on the ground floor and a large hall on the second floor. In the summer of 1960, the construction of the next United Church school building began. It was completed in the fall of 1961, and this was located between what is now the United Church and Food Center. Later, this building was changed into the town office, where it had the town hall, the library, and the Women's Institute. And behind that school building was another school building erected, the United Church. Actually, I have some yearbooks here from 1964 and 1965 from the actual United Church School before there was Grant Collegiate. So I don't know if you can see the pictures of some of them. These were the scholarship winners in 1965: Golda Peters, Margaret Taylor, and Bernice Austin. Now, I have recognized some people as we flick it through. These are some of the teachers here. Mr. Baker, principal; Mr. Bartlett, vice principal; Mr. Robbins, grade 9 teacher; Mr. Keeping, grade 8; Mrs. Keeping, grade 7; Mr. Hiscock, grade 6; Miss Rousel, grade 5; Mrs. Jenkins, grade 3 and 4; Miss Taylor, grade 1; Miss Osden, kindergarten. And then we look into some of the pictures of students graduating that year. As well as we go through, back in 1965 was when the United Church School joined with the Salvation Army School to open a Springdale Amalgamated High School. This was on November the 17th, 1965. And this was the actual the opening book, the souvenir booklet for that year. Okay, with the principal and the chairman of the board, this is Roger Simmons, and here's W. Max Mitchell, the chairman. And there are also some pictures in here of, for instance, the Glee Club then, and the Student Representative Council. This was in 1965. There are some people in this that you'll recognize if you could see the pictures up close. Okay. Well, a lot of the history is from the schools. There were also, in the 1920s, I believe, there was 2 Salvation Army schools erected in Springdale as well. The Salvation Army was the second religion to come into Springdale. This existed in 1917. And in the early 1920s, they erected 2 schools, one in the east end of Springdale and one in the west end of Springdale. Okay. Actually, I do have some Salvation Army things here. They officially began on August 30th, 1917, with Lieutenant Colonel Otway visited the town to oversee the setup of the corps. And the early teachers were also used to help in the church as well. With the churches, The early settlers felt the need for a church. This was first when Springdale was because first became a settlement and people actually first started moving here. Then they decided to build a church. First church was built actually on Mill Island, where people gathered in houses to worship God. And as I mentioned, the first Methodist church was erected in 1905. Okay, the Pentecostal Assembly operated in the town of Springdale in 1926 when three pastors, Pastor Gillette, Pastor Mitchell, and Pastor Arthur Windsor, came to spread the news of the Pentecostal religion. The Salvation Army, again, as I mentioned, began in 1917 with Colonel Otway and Captain Mark Forward, which was a school teacher from Little Ward's Harbor, was appointed as the first corps officer. The first meetings were held in the home of Thomas and Mary Ann Oxford. So the Oxfords made up the most of the members of the Salvation Army Church back then. The first citadel was erected in 1921. This stood till 1937 when a new citadel was erected. This then stood till 1961. The third citadel was used from 1961 till around 1995 when the newest and present citadel was erected. Okay, now we do have some more clippings from the opening ceremonies on Friday, so we're going to go and see those again. I believe there's some singing on there as well as other things, so we'll see what we have here.